Hello, hello, hello. My name is Vicki Hawthorne. I am an Apex Accelerator counselor in the Central Ohio region. Welcome today. Uh, I have also with me Matt Slavic. He is also an Apex Accelerator counselor in the same region. He will be monitoring the chat and also helping facilitate the Q&A when we have it. This session is running from 10 to 12 noon. About midway through, we will be taking a 10-minute break. You feel free to get up and move around or stay around for the Q&A. The presenter has been gracious enough to allow that time. So I hope you're all watered up, Mr. Dewhurst. But at this time, I'd like to just kind of tell you a little bit. Most of you know about the services that we provide, and you may not be so familiar with the name change. We recently had the name change February 1st. And with that name change came additional services that we may be able to provide our clients. But with that said, there's additional metrics that are going to go along with that. No longer will it be, there's going to be some accountability on both ends with metrics and also with you as a client to make sure that your defense industrial base ready and also in general government industrial base ready. So as you meet with your counselor, be sure to ask about that because we will be keeping track where we have never had to do that before. I've been a counselor with this program for almost 2 years, but definitely no stranger to the services that this entity provides. And out of all the resource partners affiliated with government, with assisting small businesses, I can tell you, bar none, the Apex Accelerators, if you're trying to get into the government contracting space, whether it's federal, city, state, or municipalities, you definitely need to stay connected with your Apex Accelerator counselor. I'm really humbled and blessed to be a part of this group. I would like to, at this time, introduce our speaker, Mr. Pak Sa Dewhurst, and he is the Small Business Liaison for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and he handles 3 states, Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan. And I tell you, I'm sure when you registered, you were able to see the short version of his experience, but it is his experience and his breadth and depth of this government contracting space. Out of my nearly 4 decades, I could say he's in the top. He uses a 360 approach to assisting small businesses. And what I mean by that is he's been a contracting officer. He's been a buyer. He's been a contracting officer. He's worked with domestic and he's also worked in international. He has been an entrepreneur and he is also a small business liaison to help small businesses do work in this space. So that's what I consider a 360 approach. And he has a very detailed, as you will see, process on onboarding small businesses to do business with the entity. And I can tell you again, nearly 4 decades, I haven't seen such a detailed process. So you may want to use it if you, well, you're going to have to use it if you're going to be doing business and working with Mr. Dewhurst. But I recommend you kind of use that as a benchmark as you pursue those other government contracting opportunities, because it will lay a foundation that you can use and benefit. So it won't allow you to go down so many rabbit holes. And I'm sure some of you are chuckling now because you know how it is. So without further ado, I think I've covered everything. I want to pass the mic over to Pak Sa Dewhurst. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Ms. Hawthorne. I appreciate that. And good morning, everybody. That is my ugly picture, as you can see. Good morning, everybody. I'm Pak Dewhurst, and welcome to Doing Business with the VA. This presentation stems from a philosophy that in order for you to do business with the Department of Veterans Affairs, you must first know how we do business. This presentation is about 90 minutes or so, might go an hour and 45 in length, but I assure you it will be engaging, informative, and I think easy to follow. There will be a 10-minute intermission somewhere in the middle. This briefing has been transformed since I started in this role in 2014 and has been continuously refined to further simplify the material in hopes of helping you become successful. It has also been refined through the years to catch up with some of the changes that have been occurring during my 9 years in this role, and then the changes that occur within federal contracting. So let's get to that terminology, contracting, before we proceed. When somebody says contracting, it means in the federal government, it means basically it's buying something and putting it on a contract, in a nutshell. Okay. I used to think that contracting in my Air Force days, during my first 15 years in the Air Force, when I was a security policeman, I thought that contracting was basically digging ditches and building things, but that's not the case. Contracting is actually the act of putting something on contract. Okay, so I will use some of those variations of that word. But I will define those, define those variations for you, so that way you can follow along. Now, remember, this is not training, it's familiarization. So please hold all questions until the intermission or at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. Okay, so for the overview, let's just touch on what we're going to be talking about today. The first section is going to be, well, we'll be talking about the agency, and that agency is going to be the Department of Veterans Affairs. And then we're going to talk about, the regional and the local and so forth. And so we'll whittle it down to the local level. So that way you understand how we're organized. What I believe is that in my, probably 30, must have been 33 years in the federal government, 9 with the VA, and a little over 23 years with the United States Air Force on active duty. I can say that in any agency, whether you're talking about Department of Energy, Department of Justice, Department of Defense, Department of Veterans Affairs, we're no different. We are complex, very complex. We're very vast. And so the one of the few takeaways that I want to share with you is, when you look at these slides, look at them from a standpoint of, wow, the VA is really immense, it's really large, and it's really complex. But what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to simplify and try to help you visualize our organization. Again, I believe that about half of the battle of understanding how we do business is basically know how we're organized and how we're structured. I think that's important in any conversation when we're talking about the federal government or the government as a whole. Okay. Now, the locations, that pretty much, combined with agency and locations, that kind of defines who we are. I'll talk about our acquisition roles again in contracting. It's not just contracting people who actually acquire everything. Yes, we're a big part of that. We're pretty much a big part of that pretty much most of the time, but there are other roles within the acquisitions workforce that acquire things for the community and for the mission. Product lines, I'll talk about basically the types of contracts that we do. and I'll go into buying and how we buy things. What I will do is that I will focus on set asides. Okay, and that's the type of restricted competition that we carry out. Typically here in the Department of Veterans Affairs and the federal government writ large. I won't really touch on sole sources. I won't really touch on full and open competition. Yes, we have those tools at our disposal, but I'm going to really hone in on set asides because I want to emphasize here, we always strive to compete everything to the best of our abilities and what's available in the marketplace. We'll talk about procurement readiness. Some of you may have filled out the procurement ready screening assessment document with me prior to this presentation, but probably many of you have not. And if none of you even understand what I'm talking about, I'm just going to touch on it, but I will discuss that, and I will talk about my philosophies behind that and why we implement that here in the VA. I'll talk about outreach. Basically, I'll talk about the local and the regional events, such as your business-to-business matchmakers and your other outreach events that occur here on a year-round basis. And then lastly, I'll talk about the small business performance. Basically, I'll talk about our small business goals in our agency. Every agency has them. The VA is no different, but we do have a unique set of subcategories that we focus on primarily so we can achieve those goals. And the VA is very unique in that. And then what I'm trying to allude to is the service disabled veteran-owned small business and the veteran-owned small businesses, and of course, all other small businesses. Okay, I think we all recognize this gentleman here. To care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, stated by President Abraham Lincoln himself. Now, it's a little bit outdated, but the intent is there. Of course, we have women now that serve and sacrifice, and of course they have children too, and the husbands of those fallen soldiers and Marines and airmen and guardians and sailors, they could be widowers too. So again, I think you understand that the intent is still there. Okay, the Department of Veterans Affairs. Well, how are we organized? The Department of Veterans Affairs is headed by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, appointed by the President with the advice and consent of the Senate. The Secretary of the Veterans Affairs is the Honorable Dennis McDonough. The VA Deputy Secretary is Mr. Donald Remy. The VA has three main subdivisions known as administrations, each headed by an undersecretary. And towards the very bottom of the screen, I'm going to speak to those three bottom boxes. The Veterans Benefits Administration is responsible for initial veteran registration, eligibility, determination, and 5 key lines of business. They include home loan guarantee, insurance, vocational rehab, and employment. Education such as your GI Bill and your Montgomery GI Bill, and of course nowadays the 9/11 GI Bill, and compensation and pension. The Veterans Health Administration that's us. We're responsible for providing health care in all its forms. The VHA consists of 172 major medical centers, more than 1,100 community-based outpatient clinics, as well as biomedical research at 20 locations nationwide, under the Office of Research and Development, and many more types of facilities. But I'm going to hone in on those because those are important, and it relates to you, the marketplace. And of course, the National Cemetery Administration, they're responsible for providing burial and memorial benefits as well as maintenance of VA cemeteries. But I'm going to talk about the middle one again. That's the Veterans Health Administration. Keep in mind that the yellow dotted line going across the bottom portion of the screen, anything that's above that is all relegated in the area of Washington, D.C., probably makes up about about 1 or 2% of the entire VA workforce. The other 98 or 99% of the workforce are at the bottom, below that yellow line. Contracting, we fall under acquisition, logistics, and construction, as shown on the upper right-hand corner, the bottom rectangular box there. Acquisition, logistics, and construction. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, I will talk about the Veterans Health Administration. Again, that's us. Okay, before I go into our locations and going on this field trip with you all and showing you each of our locations within the Veterans Integrated Service Networks, or VISN 10, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana, I'm going to talk about by the numbers. And again, this is one of those slides that will tell you, hey, we are very large as the VA. And so, but I also want to illustrate not only the immensity, but also truly what, and the numbers do play an importance here, but it'll kind of make it a little bit simpler for you to understand overall and what you'll be contending with, for lack of a better word, when you reach out to us. And these are some of the things you need to probably keep in mind. Okay. We're about 93 years old. Yes, we definitely know what we're doing, but I'm kind of surprised by that figure. I expected us to be a little bit older than that as an agency, but there you have it. We're 93 years old. That's a long time. We are responsible for 172 VA medical centers across the country, and U.S. outlying areas such as Hawaii, Alaska, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, and even the Philippines. We have a presence there at the U.S. Embassy in Manila, the Philippines, and also American Samoa and the like. There are about a little over 1,100 community-based outpatient clinics. Out of the entire Department of Veterans Affairs, our sub-department, the Veterans Health Administration, of the three, we take up 92% of the entire VA workforce, about 348,000 VHA employees. That's Veterans Health Administration employees, about 92%. And the remainder, consisting of the National Cemetery Administration and the Veterans Benefits Administration, we're about almost 380,000 VA employees. And just keep in mind, there's roughly 21 million U.S. veterans within our population here in the United States. About a third of those, seems like a small fraction, but a third of those account for a little over 6 million that are actually enrolled in VA healthcare. So we have a pretty important mission, and a very large one at that. Okay, so let's get on the road and go see where we're located. Okay, let's begin in the Dayton area. Of the 172 VA medical centers across the country, Dayton, just down the road from me, is the second oldest. The oldest facility is the one that's located in Augusta, Maine. They're about a year older than we are. You'll see a number underneath the Dayton VA Medical Center, underneath that photograph of that facility on the right-hand side of the screen. Look at the name of the facility, the Dayton VA Medical Center. You'll see a number underneath that. That number underneath Dayton is 2,135. That is the number of VA employees at that facility, and it's 4 clinics that the Dayton VA Medical Center is responsible for. So let me tell you why it's important. It's important because I get many people that'll ask me, "Hey, Pak, do you know a John Williams over there at the VA?" I really don't know who that person is going to be. And the reason being is that we're just large, and chances are is that 99% of the employees there at the Dayton VA Medical Center, for example, will not even know who I am. They'll recognize my position. They'll recognize that I'm part of contracting in its office. So just know that. We have the Cincinnati VA Medical Center, again, a little over 2,000 employees, just like Dayton, and it's responsible for the 6 clinics that are located in and around that area. Okay. Cincinnati's VA Mobile Healthcare Unit, as you see there, is one of 4 in our Vision area. The mobile medical units meet many needs of both veterans and non-veterans living in remote locations, and who are unable to seek medical assistance because of distance or hardship. We have the Chillicothe VA Medical Center. It's a small facility, but it's a major facility in its own right. When I think of the Chillicothe VA Medical Center, I associate words with that facility with terminology like traumatic brain injury, mental health, psychiatry, PTSD, opioid abuse. Those are the words that I associate with that particular facility. All in all 172 VA medical centers across the country, they all do generally the same things. They provide the same type of care and rehabilitation and and treatment for our veterans. But I like to, and something that I've learned too through the years, that there are facilities that specialize in certain things. Again, Chillicothe offers a lot of things for our veterans, but but they also focus a little bit more on the mental health aspect. So if any of you out there are counselors, or you offer, furniture for psychiatry clinics and offices, for example, then that might be something that you should probably be interested in. So just coming out of left field is just something to think about. Excuse me. The Chalmers P. Wiley VA Ambulatory Care Center. It's located there in Columbus. It is one of 3 ambulatory healthcare centers across the country. The 2 others are located in Southern California. What is an ambulatory care center? Basically, all that means is that there is no bed space. So it's same day inpatient, outpatient. Okay, the Cleveland's VA Medical Center is the 3rd largest in the country, and it is still growing. It is immense. In fact, I believe they should be their own region to themselves. There are about 13 or 14 clinics that actually support the VA Medical Center there. And they're also a mobile healthcare unit there that's assigned to the Cleveland area. Okay, let's go to Michigan, just up the road. We have a John D. Dingle VA Medical Center in Detroit, and they're responsible for 2 clinics in that metropolitan area. And there's also a VA mobile healthcare unit that serves that region of the state. We have the Ann Arbor VA Medical Center. It's a very large facility. It's about 2,800 employees. You'll also notice a mad scientist cackling. He's appearing in the Ann Arbor area. He represents one of the VA's 20 Office of Research and Development, or ORD, sites across the country. There are 2 ORD sites within our VISN. The VA's ORD is a research and development agency of the Veterans Health Administration. Basically, the department focuses on biomedical, uh, uh, biomedical and healthcare research for the care of veterans and wounded soldiers. It has a budget of around $1 billion per year. And in addition, it receives about a little over 700 million derived from federal and non-federal grants from other agencies during that fiscal year, and every fiscal year, roughly. Ann Arbor VA Medical Center and its healthcare system collaborates with the University of Michigan and its research facilities and resources. And even though we have 2 large ORD sites out of the 20 across the country here in VISN 10, there's unofficially, well, I believe unofficially, it might be official, there might be a 3rd ORD site, but at a smaller scale, and that's Case Western University in Cleveland, and they work hand in hand with the Cleveland VA Medical Center and its supporting clinics there. And again, they do research as well, and that's in collaboration with Case Western University there. We have the Alita E. Lutz VA Medical Center. That's in Saginaw. Yes, it's a small facility, but there's many partnered clinics that they're responsible for that are numerous and pretty much takes up the expanse of the northern part of the main part of Michigan. When I say the main part of Michigan, it does not include the Upper Peninsula. And what you'll see there near upper left is going to be a white flag. Some of you may not be able to see it. Most of you might. And on that flag is the VA Great Lakes Healthcare System, VISN 12. So the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is not within my area. It's in the area of VISN 12. And mind you, there's 18 VISNs across the country, Veterans Integrated Service Networks, or VISN, V-I-S-N. And my counterpart over there in VISN 12 is based out of Milwaukee. So if and or when you decide to reach out to me after this briefing, I'm going to provide you 2 products as well as a pretty comprehensive explanation of 2 of those attachments in that email. The first attachment is going to be the directory of all the small business liaisons within the VA. Again, there's 18 VISNs throughout the VHA, and there's going to be 18 small business liaisons like myself, 1 for each of those. I know them, they know me. We talk quite often, so we certainly collaborate quite a bit. So again, I'm not saying that, obviously it's a free country. You can do business anywhere you wish, but just know that you're not restricted from doing business here in VISN 10. You can do business elsewhere as well if you're interested. And I will provide that directory to you. The second attachment will be a map. And I will get to it. I'll talk about that much later in this presentation. Okay. The last facility in Michigan is the Battle Creek VA Medical Center, and they're responsible for 4 clinics in that area. And let's go to Indiana. Okay. We have the Fort Wayne campus, and we have the Marion campus. Combined, they formulate pretty much all of the services and healthcare that can be provided. They're about 45 minutes apart, so I look at them as being 1 facility, but really officially they're 2. As you notice there, they're kind of small in terms of personnel, but again, combined, they provide just about everything that a major facility does provide. And combined, they provide support for 5 clinics in that area. Okay. We have the Richard Rauterbush VA Medical Center that's located in Indianapolis. That's where the other VA ORD site is located, as well as a VA mobile healthcare unit that's also out there. The Health Services Research and Development Service is located there in Indy at the medical center. It's a mid-sized research and development program, but also collaborates with the Indiana University School of Medicine. And there's 6 clinics in that area that the Indianapolis VA Medical Center, Richard L. Raudebush VA Medical Center in Indy, that's who they support there. Okay, let's talk about the VA's acquisition roles. Everyone wears orange on Thursday. I'm just kidding. Okay, when we talk about the acquisition team, it consists of all participants in government acquisitions. It includes not only representatives of the technical supply and procurement communities, but also the customers they serve and the contractors who provide the products and services. Again, that's you from the marketplace. So we have contracts people, like the contracting officer standing next to a very large contract, which is would be pretty scary in real life. A contracting officer representative or core is an individual designated and authorized in writing by the contracting officer to perform specific technical or administrative functions that relates to the contract. They're the technical eyes and ears, if you will. The contracting officer is responsible for numerous contracts. Therefore, it's physically impossible for the contracting officer or the contract specialist to monitor progress on each of their contracts at each of the VA sites. Only the CO, the contracting officer, can obligate the U.S. government. Now, the role of each member of the acquisition team is to exercise personal initiative and sound business judgment in providing the best value product or service to meet the customer's needs. And the business of spending taxpayers' dollars is a very serious business on our end. So we definitely take that to heart, and we take that very seriously. And also keep in mind too, those aren't those, when I think of the acquisition workforce, these are the main ones that I think of in my head. Okay, there are many more and equal and members of the acquisition workforce who has an equal stake in the act of acquisitions. So keep in mind there are many more players between those that you see there. But again, these are the ones that I can think of based on my experience in dealing with the customer and things like that. So, and of course, the communication between all of those, even the ones not shown in between, the communication has to occur between all of us, and that has to be on a continuous cycle. Why? Because market research, when we conduct our market research to ensure that the marketplace has the latest and greatest capabilities or products or services, we have to make sure and keep up with our market research and to ensure that if we do have a bona fide need for something, that we'll know who and where to reach out to. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the customer's role. Okay. Now, your first dealings with a government representative is usually with a small business liaison, like me. We work alongside contract specialists, contracting officers at the contracting offices. Let me tell you, and I want to emphasize this too, because it's important, because this will determine whether or not you understand our role in to distinguish us from the customers. Okay. None of us know, when I say none of us, that's contracting, the contracting office, and I'm included in that mix. None of us know the first thing about your widget or whether the VA needs it today or tomorrow or next week. So basically, ultimately, your goal is to showcase it to someone with unique qualifications, their credentials, and experience to determine the widget's suitability for our patients. Now, allowing access, if I would to allow you access to our procurement decision makers, those customers, it will depend on your procurement readiness. Otherwise, it would be a disservice to you and your company's stakeholders to meet with our customers if you aren't familiar with how we do business. Now, to showcase your capabilities, you must introduce yourselves, interface, and develop that relationship with the key stakeholder, those customers. They're also known as the requester, the technical expert, the subject matter expert, the program manager, the surgeon, the IT specialist, hygienist, logistics officer, the guy who works at the motor pool. Those are potentially can be your customers, or be the customers that you need to interface with. That should ultimately be your goal. Speaking with me is important. Introducing yourself to me is important, absolutely. But my role is to facilitate you and you in engaging with those customers, because they're the ones who's going to make that decision of whether or not they want to buy scalpels or not, or that widget. So when you meet with them, they may not even have a need for your product or your good or service that you're offering, but all they're doing is basically, yes, they're also networking, just very much what you're going to be doing. Networking is just as important to them. Why? Because of market research. They want to maintain that relationship with you because you offer something for something that they may need here in a week, a month, or 6 months down the line. We may not necessarily need it today, so keep that in mind. And that's where the system for award management, or sam.gov, comes into play. You need to research that and look at those requirements often, if not every day. You need to look at those requirements that are posted and publicized in that government-wide point of entry, also known as sam.gov, or contract opportunities. So keep that in mind. I may touch on that later. Title V of Public Law 100-656 requires that federal agencies make available its procurement forecast to the Small Business Administration and to interested businesses such as yourself. So yes, to supplement the sam.gov contract opportunities, there is a VA specific portal, I should say, and it's called FCO, stands for Forecast of Contracting Opportunities, and it's just at the VA level. You can look up, VISN 2 in New England. You can look up VISN 8 in Florida, VISN 10 here in Indiana, Ohio, or Michigan, or you can look at VISN 22 out there in Southern California and Arizona and New Mexico. You can go in there and see what tentative, it's not definite, the tentative upcoming requirements, and it's going to be based on its fiscal year quarter. We're in quarter number, I think we're in the second quarter now, towards the tail end of the second quarter. So you must understand what quarter it's going to occur in and when they're going to need that requirement. It's going to have a rough order magnitude, and what that means is basically it's going to be a range, something that will be probably valued at $250,000 to $500,000, or something that's valued at $25,000 up to 100,000. It'll have a range in there to give you an idea of what they're looking for. Are they giving you a price? No, it's just a rough, it's not even an estimate, it's a range. So you'll see that there. You can type in by NAICS code, you can type in by PSC, you can type in by keyword to look for those particular supplies or services. If it's not listed there, it doesn't mean that we don't need it or don't have a plan for it. Oftentimes the departments in our VA medical centers wouldn't post for whatever reason that may be. So again, you need to definitely look, don't rely on it, but it should certainly supplement your research day to day or frequently in looking at sam.gov and other platforms and other resources. So keep that in mind. Basically, basically, and I want to emphasize again on that FCO, the forecasting of contracting opportunities, and every federal agency has their own FCO, so know that. Now, the forecast is one of the many tools available to small businesses, as I mentioned. All are projected procurement, not definite. And of course, they are subject to revision or cancellation. So the final decisions on the extent of the competition, the small business participation, the estimated value, or any aspect of the procurement action will not be made until each of the procurement is initiated. The forecast data is not a commitment by the government, as I mentioned also earlier. It's not a commitment by the government to purchase the desired products and services. Anything can happen. We may have a requirement or a tentative requirement next quarter or the quarter after for X, Y, or Z product or service, but something, it might be removed off that FCO because of maybe we had to pay for an emergency and we don't quite have the funds to acquire whatever was posted on FCO. So again, anything can happen and anything can change. So, and I'm going to emphasize this a little more, and I don't want to kick a dead horse, but numerous businesses, they'll reach out to me inquiring about future requirements. That's natural. I get it. And the needs of our agency. Again, I can't emphasize enough. I'm a contracts professional who works in a contracts department among contract specialists and contracting officers. We in contracting would have zero knowledge of any future requirements. Okay. It's only the customer who would have the firsthand knowledge of their own needs. Now you're kind of wondering, okay, well, who are those customers again? Well, let me show you who they truly are. And I'll go over these flags, these 5 flags here on the screen with you. Okay. Before I tell you who the customers really are, and it's quite simple, I'll talk about that the customer is also responsible for defining the requirement. They conduct the market research. Well, how do they do that? Well, if they have your capability statement on hand in their desk drawer or saved as a PDF on their computer, they'll contact you from that capability statement, and they may reach out and say, look, I have a need. I just need a quote. So that way they can prepare the independent government cost estimate. That's shown at the bottom center of the screen there. The independent government cost estimate is oftentimes based on the quote that they would obtain from you, the vendor. Once they get that estimate from you, they develop the funding and their requisition document. Again, contracting is still in the dark on this. They have no idea that this particular procurement will be a procurement or will be a requirement. And the last thing that is done prior to us receiving the package to buy it would be at the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. They would prepare the statement of work, the performance work statement, or specifications, drawings, and so forth. And they also develop the evaluation criteria if it's over $250,000 in value. And they also, with collaboration with the contracts office, they would develop the acquisition plan. And all those people that you see on your screen, of course, obviously not all inclusive, but that's an example of who the customer is. The requirements come from those departments. You'll see the guy running on up top there. Yes, every VA medical center, major ones, will have their own police force. They may need gun holsters. They may need boots, they may need nightsticks, they may need office supplies, and they also may need the firefighter in the bottom left. He may need some equipment there, may need services to inspect their fire extinguishers throughout the entire facility. You have the counselor there on the far left. He may need furniture for his office, or he may need computers. We can get that through SOUP or GSA typically, but just know that the requirements are going to be wide ranging. For example, with Dayton, with 2,100 employees, you can look at it in terms of being a base. A campus. I mean, there's a lot of things going on that campus. It's not just supporting our, directly touching and treating and rehabilitating our patients. It's a lot of other functions that occur on that campus to make the whole mission go. Okay, let's talk about contracting. And the first guy I want to talk about is the contracting's role. And basically, our role in contracting is to acquire capabilities for the mission. And with that, we purchase, rent, lease, or otherwise obtain capabilities from non-federal sources. It includes making grants and cooperative agreements. Remember the Office of Research and Development, the 20 sites across the country, and of course the 2 or 3 that are located here in Business 10. A lot of those instruments to establish those business relationships with them is done, with grants. And also by purchase orders and your standard contracts as well. But when we say grants, try to, in your mind, associate that with Office of Research and Development. And of course, cooperative agreements between the universities and the VA Medical Center there in the area. They have that cooperative arrangement to where they collaborate and work together. They offer facilities in exchange for services, or, hey, I'm offering you your lab at that university and may not be able to afford certain equipment. Hey, here in the VA, we might be able to provide that for you. So that way we can collaborate. And so that way we have a mutual goal in the research, because both parties will benefit from that. Okay. We select and solicit sources. We prepare and award contracts, and we fulfill all phases of contract administration. Basically, yes, we do our market research. Basically, we receive the requirements package with the funding and the statement of work and what have you, and then we decide how we're going to buy it. And then when we buy it, it goes all the way up to assembling. Doing the market research, assembling the contract, negotiating the contract, and awarding the contract, all the way up to the administration of that contract. It could be up to 5 years for a service contract, for example, when there may be a base period of 1 year plus 4 option years. And for a total of 5 years. And so the administration of that contract is the responsibility of the contract specialist. And at the same time, they're awarding contracts, amidst their duties day to day. Somebody administering contracts, they could be administering 20, 30, or 40 contracts if they're in the service contracts department, or they could be overseeing construction contracts. They could be handling 5 or 6 or 7 buys at once, and each of those will be in the millions of dollars. And at the same time, those contract specialists or contracting officers who are doing, who are executing those construction actions, again, they're also administering those contracts too, to ensure that those projects are being completed. And so that can take many months, sometimes years, to finish. And so they're the ones who are ensuring that things are getting done on that contract. It's no different from a service contract, or a medical sharing contract, and I'll talk about that here shortly, or a leasing contract or a service contract. A lot of that is going to be fielding questions from the core. Remember, I talked about the contracting officer representative there. It was the guy with the hard hat that was standing next to the individual shaking hands with the contract. And I think you remember that. The contracting officer representative is going to be the eyes and ears. Especially in the construction and services, that contracting officer is really going to rely on that core or the contracting officer representative to give them updates and to give them a progress on how the government is progressing with those projects or service contracts. The administration of that contract will end when the last invoice is paid and when that contract is closed out. So there's a lot of things that a contract specialist does day in and day out. Probably some of the reasons why that, and I'm not making an excuse for them. I get it. I used to sit in their shoes. It's why it's very difficult to get a hold of them. And that's why we can only encourage you to get a hold of me. You getting access to a list of all the contracting officers and contract specialists in our, at our 10 locations here in the 3 states, that's not going to happen. And no small business specialist or liaison is ever going to give you a list of that, because that would actually negate their role in being the liaison between you and the contracts community. So keep that in mind. That's why there's people like me that do this job. Okay. If they're receiving phone calls day in and day out, they will never get anything else done. Okay. So that's kind of how to frame things, so that way you understand our role and how there's certainly a distinguishable difference between them and me and all other roles. Let me talk a little bit about something else after this. Again, our supplies, services, construction, leasing, and medical sharing. Those are the types of contracts that we act on and then we execute day to day. And again, it's not only just awarding them, but it's, like I said, it's also administering those contracts through the life of those contracts until that effort ends. Let me talk about the pandemic here real quick. The pandemic has given us basically an opportunity to demonstrate to our senior leaders and our customers and industry our increased productivity with greater efficiencies. So as a result of the pandemic, we've proven that we can be productive and by teleworking. The 3,200 contracts people in the 3 sub-agencies, the Veteran Benefits Administration, the National Cemetery Administration, of course, the largest group is going to be us, the Veterans Health Administration. Pretty much 99% of us are teleworking. So what that means is that we're working from home. And again, the pandemic has proven that we are much more productive and we can get much more accomplished with this arrangement in the last 3 years. And so this is how things are going to be. So if you're wondering about that, let's talk about the contract specialist and what that person does. Now, talked about that kind of the 5 flags of where things go, or what the customer actually has to produce before we receive the procurement package. Okay. Now, the contracts office will be made aware of a customer's requirement when the contract specialist receives the customer's requirements package. Of course, the statement of work, the funding, and so forth. From here, we conduct our own market research. We analyze cost and prices, and we select the optimal methods of contracting. Okay, so with research, yes, we also conduct market research for all acquisitions over the micro purchase threshold, and I'll talk more about the micro purchase threshold later. We analyze cost and price with our proposals, and to ensure the prices that are offered or quoted or proposed are fair and reasonable. We select the best types and method of contracting to include selection of socioeconomic set-asides. Socioeconomic set-asides could include SD, VOSB set-aside, veteran-owned set-aside, woman-owned set-aside, hub zone set-aside, so forth and so forth. Okay, we negotiate prices and resolve a wide range of challenges, and we administer services and medical staffing contracts regardless of our specific contracting roles. We are all business advisors too, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so just to go into resolving problems in more detail, we resolve problems of delivery, production, quality, differing site conditions, of course, if it's related to construction, and inspection of goods when they're on the loading dock. We administer contracts. We act as a contract administrator on those awarded contracts until the end of that, until the end of life of that contract. We advise, again, as I mentioned, I just kind of alluded to it earlier, we advise customers at our VA medical centers and our clinics, and then we advise contractors, you, We're business advisor first and foremost. It's not just me, the small business liaison, who acts as a business advisor. It's the contract specialist and the contracting officer. First and foremost, we're all taught to be business advisors, basically providing you the guidance and just the assistance, and helping you understand the requirements, or understanding the bid or the quote that's out there. Again, they're, reach out to them. Oftentimes they're going to be busy, absolutely, but many of those will obviously take the effort to communicate and to respond to your inquiries. They will make that effort. Sometimes it's just not possible, depending depending on the circumstances and the size of that procurement. It could be in the many millions of dollars, and that person may not have the time or the luxury of time to get back with you. But communicating back with you will certainly be in the form of an email or a message, or maybe even a telephone call. So they do have that obligation to return or give you a response in some form or fashion. Okay. The person standing there over the contract's desks, basically that is a contracting officer. A contracting officer does everything that I have illustrated here that a contract specialist does, but in addition to that, they obligate. They provide signature authority, and they execute contract awards within their warrant authority. And that happens in every federal agency across the land. We are no different in that regard. So what you see there are actually samples of actual certificates for certificate of appointment, as appointing that person as a contracting officer. One example is with the VA, and the other example is with the United States Air Force once upon a time. And we are instructed to hang those up in our offices as well, to let others know that, hey, we have that responsibility, even to let our own community know that, hey, we have a responsibility. We are in the minority, but if you need assistance with a contract or something to put together, or you need me to award it for you, then that tells the reviewer or the person seeing those certificates, it lets them know that we have a little bit more experience, and we have that authority to obligate the taxpayers' dollars, basically signing the award. Small business liaison, that's me. I didn't want to be left out, but I also wanted to cover what what we do, the small business liaison community. Now, again, what is the difference between a small business liaison and a small business specialist? Nothing. Although the small business specialist job title is probably more commonly used throughout the federal government and the other agencies, the small business liaison here in the VA and small business specialist alike perform the exact same duties. We do the same thing. We're just called different things. The 5 areas and what we're responsible for. First off, we provide acquisition training, regardless of, we provide acquisition training regarding small business programs. We provide that to our acquisition staff and customers. We provide information to firms such as yourself on how to do business with the federal government and the Department of Veterans Affairs. We monitor small business performance, provide reports and action plans to ensure compliance, and we inform the acquisition workforce on latest developments, policies, and procedures. And we review procurements and its market research or rationale, accuracy, and compliance. Basically, I review every procurement before they get awarded or before they get publicized to request for quotes or proposals. I review those procurements that are not set aside for veteran-owned firms. So anything that's not set aside for competition, just for SD VOSBs and VOSBs exclusively. And again, if they're being set aside for women-owned businesses or hubs-owned businesses or small businesses, or they're even being sole source to a large business, for example, I actually have to review those procurements to ensure that the contract specialist and or the contracting officer has done everything they could in determining that there are no others, or that we have a limited maturity within that marketplace. There's some markets out there, depending on the NAICS code or the item or the service. We have a very mature industry for something. Maybe many small businesses and other socioeconomic categories, but there could be some industries to where there just may be a few players in there. Typically, your large businesses with very limited small business participation. So, but it's wide ranging with that. And of course, it's a continuous thing. I have to review those, pretty much every day. I got to review these procurements. I do that because why? Well, another aspect of that is that the market changes every day. Okay, so if I review something that was, from 2 weeks ago for one product, well, 2 weeks later, that product might be bought a little differently because something has changed. Either the market has changed, it's gotten more mature, or the pandemic, for example, has changed industries. All of them? No, but it's certainly impacted many industries and how they do business and what they provide and how they provide it. So kind of be mindful of that. Despite the horrors and the nightmares that are associated with the pandemic, from my standpoint as a small business liaison, I see that as a silver lining in terms of commerce and what small businesses can do and what they can provide for us federal agencies. So that way we can continue with our mission. Lastly, here we participate in interagency programs, government industry conferences to promote socioeconomic business concerns and practices. Basically, I've alluded to it earlier as well. Your business-to-business matchmakers, your trade shows, and things like that. Those are the things. For me, that's my favorite part of the job, but it only accounts for a very small percentage of what I do. But that is an important aspect of what I do. So, okay. Let's talk about product lines. Okay, each of the product lines shown here lists the top NAICS codes by yearly expenditures. They're not all inclusive, so I just picked the predominant NAICS code for each of the product lines. Here for supply, again, the top 8 NAICS codes in terms of expenditures and the predominant NAICS codes are shown there. And again, 339113 at the very top there. And going down that list, basically starting at the top, 339113, basically is the most predominant NAICS codes that we deal with and that we purchase, for our VA customers. Of course, the next one will be linen supply and so forth. There are many more NAICS codes underneath that list of 8. It's just that I don't have a screen big enough to show you. Okay, but I just want to show you and illustrate to you the more predominant and the main NAICS codes under each of those product lines. So there you have it for supplies. For the product line in general services, those are the more predominant NAICS codes, and of course there's many dozens more underneath that list. Medical sharing, that's a very unique aspect of services. In fact, most of those performance-based efforts are not even considered service contracts, even though it does take a human being to perform those actions. Because when I say that the Service Contract Act does not apply to medical sharing, in most instances, the Service Contract Act applies to the general services that you saw earlier in the previous slides. These quote unquote types of services can be looked upon as being kind of non-commercial in nature. So the people who conduct healthcare, or I'm sorry, home healthcare, respite care, nursing home care, care for the homeless, all the way to you know, teleradiology, to residential mental health, diagnostic imaging centers, remote teleradiology. Those are very unique functions that have to be performed. One way to describe it, and another aspect to describe medical sharing product line, is basically just envision for a minute you have the Dayton VA Medical Center, right? And a fire alarm goes off, and you have 100 physicians in their scrubs that are standing outside in the parking lot, and they're waiting for the VA Medical Center fire department to reset those alarms. So with the 100 physicians that are standing there in the parking lot, maybe 6 of those out of the 100 may be contracted. The 92 or 93 others are going to be your government doctors, your GS-15s, your GS-14s, on a different pay schedule, obviously, because they're physicians. They are in those positions because the government is paying them as federal employees, and they were able to recruit them and bring them in so that they could become those government employees, serving in that capacity as a doctor or a physician or what have you. The very few of those positions that are contracted could be like, say, your anesthesiologist, your brain surgeon, things like that. The government is not going to be able to obviously compete with private sector in offering an equivalent pay or salary or compensation to that of an anesthesiologist or a brain surgeon, and their paychecks and what they make outside of the government. So what they do is that, yes, we're in need of anesthesiologists on a daily basis and doing their jobs or doing the support the mission, or that brain surgeon in some of the VA medical centers. But again, the government is having a hard time hiring those and putting them on a government payroll, because it's just, it's just too, their median salary is going to be too far out of reach for the government to even compete. So oftentimes for those very few positions, we have to contract those. We have leasing. So a lot of your VA clinics and even your contracts offices, most contracts offices are located off campus. Ours was in Kettering, here down the road, right in the Dayton City area. Our contracts office is still located there in Kettering, and that is done through a lease contract. And of course, as a result of the pandemic, for example, we have decreased our footprint in that office by about 70%. So because all of us are working from home, but except our senior leaders and things like that. We do meet in those offices. We do meet as an entire office in there, about once or twice a year for meetings and things like that. But again, that lease is done through a contract, and so yeah, we are not we're not any different from anyone else. So if we need to contract space for contracts people to work in, then again, we have to have a lease for that. So. And then you have your purchase card. I didn't mention this earlier. I don't, how should I say this? Yes, the government and even the VA, we have a government purchase card program. Yes, it's a Visa card, I believe. And that Visa card is issued to that government employee. And yes, that government employee can make purchases to support their own office or their own department. But it does not mean that contracts, our contracting office, we do not have any we do not have any purchase card buyers. Well, we might have one or two, and they support the office, like office supplies and things like that. But as a whole, the contracting office, if anything that is a supply item that is $9,000 or less than $10,000 for a supply item, we don't have visibility on that. For services that are less than $2,500, we don't have visibility on that either, nor construction at $2,000. It could be a window frame being replaced. It could be a project to repair a porch outside of a building. That doesn't necessarily need to be on a contract as long as it's under $2,000. That can be bought with a purchase card. So out of the 181 employees in our contracts office at our 10 locations, we have about 15 purchase card program coordinators, and what they are basically people who track these buys that are conducted in the VA medical centers and the clinics. So just to give you an overview or kind of a more of a visual. So out of the 23,400 employees here in VISN 10, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana that work in all these VA medical centers and clinics, 1,019 of those, last time I checked, 1,019 of those are actual purchase card holders. So what they do is that they actually support their own missions, their own offices to support themselves. So another example would be the woman that's working at the front desk for a motor pool in the Columbus VA Medical Center. She only supports the 9 mechanics and her boss, and she's the secretary. And so she goes out with that purchase card and she goes on GSA Advantage, and she can make a transaction and she can purchase that welcome mat for her porch on the front of the building, or she can buy shovels when somebody has to shovel the snow around the bays outside the facility, or buying office supplies for her files for her cabinet. Okay, so that purchase card is actually for her to use to support her own mission. Okay, but if she wants something that's over $10,000, say she wants patio furniture for her mechanics to take a break during lunch outside, and she wants to buy patio furniture that could be over $10,000, for example, or it could be a gazebo that she needs because it rains or it snows. That could be over $2,000 for a construction project. That gazebo alone could be $5,000. $5,000, and so that has to go on a contract. That's when we, the contracting office, will get visibility, because now we have to buy it for them because it's over the $2,000 micro purchase threshold for construction. Or the patio furniture, that's $11,000 for supply. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of patio furniture, but it's an example nonetheless. So anything below the supply threshold of 10,000, services and construction, again, anything under those dollar amounts will be bought with a purchase card. Okay. Before I forget, I'll tell you that we do about 14 to 16,000 contract actions every year as an office, between 180, 81 of us. About 145 of us, I think, are actually doing contracts. There's the remainder are your purchase card program coordinators, people like me, your procurement analyst, your training officer, and so forth. But about 100, 140, 145 out of the 180 does contracts. And between just 145 of those every year, we average about 14 to 16,000 contract actions. It could be an award of a purchase order, it could be a modification, it could be a contract closeout. But let me tell you about purchase card. For purchase card transactions, again, we're not responsible for those purchase card purchases. It's the 1,019 customers in those facilities that are. Out of the 1,019 purchase card holders in those facilities, about every quarter, there's about 115,000 transactions done with credit cards to purchase their own equipment or services, or your minor construction to help support those departments. 115,000 transactions per quarter. During the last quarter of the fiscal year, which runs from 1 July to the end of September, that goes up to about 142,000, roughly 142 to 146,000 transactions for that last quarter. So what our purchase card coordinators do, our 18 purchase card coordinators do in contracting, is that they ensure that what they're doing with those cards in those departments, they're making sure that what they're doing is lawful and that they're not buying Disney Cruise Line tickets, they're not buying toys for their sons, and they're not buying gasoline for their government vehicles or their personal vehicles. They're making sure that what they're doing is lawful, and they're making sure that they have the appropriate training for those card holders, and they're making sure that the decisions they make are ethical. Okay, for the last part of this section, let's talk about NAICS codes. The 2022 NAICS codes and 2022 size standards have changed. In fact, it goes through a change about every 5 years. So this replaces the 2017 NAICS codes and size standards. Basically, in a nutshell, the NAICS codes for 2022 revisions have created 111 new industries by reclassifying, combining, or splitting 156 NAICS codes from 2017. The size standards for these 111 new industries in 2022 have resulted in the following. Pretty much, I'm not even going to speak to those. I'll let you see that. As you can see, there are a lot of changes. In my recent memory, doing this for the last 18 years in the contracts profession, I think this is probably, to my recollection, probably the most comprehensive change that we have seen for this 5-year period. Well, the world is changing, and so does our economy, and so does our marketplace. That has to change too. Okay. Now, this is where you come in to where you need to ensure that you are using the appropriate NAICS codes and the appropriate size standards. Okay. Most of you are going to be registered. I would hope all of you are registered in SAM by now, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say most of you are going to be registered in the System for Award Management, or SAM.gov. You must update your small business status based on the new size standards effective October 1st of 2022. So until the SAM registration is updated, the SAM profiles that you have in your representations and certifications will continue to display the small business status under the old size standards from 2017. That is your responsibility. No one is going to do that for you. Okay. You'll go into representations and certifications in your profile. Go into the clause FAR 52.219-1, small business program representations, and somewhere within that very lengthy clause, you're going to see a chart. You'll see the NAICS codes. And I grabbed this from a company that does agriculture, that supports the agricultural mission. It had nothing to do with the VA, so I didn't want to, I wanted to protect the innocent. So I used a vendor at random that typically supports, that does not typically support the VA. But I want to illustrate here that the NAICS codes in the far left column, those one or two of those, or none, but there's a chance that one or two of those, or all of those, may be outdated. So if a contract specialist is asking his contracting officer that day to award a contract for him because he wants to get that contract off his desk so he can work on other procurements, before he presses the enter button to award that contract, if that request for quote in SAM.gov is being advertised as a NAICS code other than what you see here in this chart, and if you have a NAICS code that's not updated consistent with that request for quote, and even if you're the successful offer, let's say you were the lowest priced quote, for example, you won't be given that award, because NAICS codes drive everything we do in contracting. If you don't have the NAICS codes in that request for quote, and you have outdated NAICS codes in your representations and certifications as shown here, then you're not going to be eligible for that award. They will go to the next vendor who has that appropriate NAICS code in that chart. Okay. Again, going back to the contract, basically anything above those dollar amounts of $10,000 for supplies, or $10,000 or more for supplies, $2,500 more or more for services, and $2,000 or more for construction, it'll go in a contract. And those are the ones, again, that contracting will only have visibility on. Okay. And again, just as a reminder, the fiscal year 2023 began 1 October of last year, 1 October, and fiscal year 2023 will end on September 30th. And typically the last quarter, roughly about 45 to 60 days of the last 45 or 60 days out of those last 90 days is when our office is going to be doing twice the workload because of end of year, and trying to obligate all of our excess funding that we have. We call that fallout money. So a lot of our transactions are going to be is going to be doubled in volume, and be twice the workload for me as well, because I have to review those. So if you have a hard time, so you're probably going to forget this slide or forget I even say this, but if you're trying to get a hold of me in the last quarter, especially the last 60 days of that quarter, I will I will respond, because that's my job to do that. But you're probably not going to get a whole lot of support from me. And the reason why I say that is because I'm supporting the end of year efforts of my contract specialists and contracting officers. But I'm certainly very active 10 months out of the year with vendors, and trying to get them eligible and procurement ready, and help them become competitive, in the marketplace. So if you're scrambling and you want to get certified, and you want you want to send out your capability statements during the middle part of September, for example, those end users in those departments are probably not going to pay very close attention to your capability statements, because you're probably late in the game, and they probably already have their heart set on the vendors that they're going to suggest to those contracting officers. Okay, so a lot of your interaction with the end users, wanting to meet with them and so forth, that's certainly going to happen for at least 9 months out of the year, but don't expect the last 3 months to where you're going to get that opportunity. In fact, that's going to be slim to none, and you're getting that opportunity to meet with them during the last quarter. So not to put a damper, but I'm just pretty much wanted to convey to you that is the nature of our business in the government. It's no different from any other federal agency. During end of year, we all have to spend our fallout money, and to ensure that we get those obligated no later than September 30th. Okay. Okay, very last, well, second to the last screen before we had a 10-minute intermission. This right here is the federal acquisition regulations. This is what the physical book looks like. We no longer use it, but it's still available for us. We still get those issued to us if we want, but most of us like to use the FAR electronically online, and it's through a government website that we use. That's always updated. By the time the FAR is published, it's already out of date. And they publish it, I believe, twice a year, I believe. Now, what is the FAR? Well, it's the Federal Acquisition Regulations. What does it do? Well, it's a body of regulations that are the primary sources of authority governing the federal government procurement process. So all those federal agencies, to include the VA, we use the FAR. Whether you're buying C-17 cargo planes from Boeing, you got to use the FAR. And if you're buying insurance for nuclear reactors, let's say you work in the Department of Energy and you're buying insurance for nuclear reactors, you got to use the FAR. If you're buying medical equipment and supplies at the VA or Department of Health and Human Services, we got to use the FAR. If we're buying something really unique to the VA, then oftentimes those procedures and those items and those methods are going to be in their FAR supplement. We all have to follow the FAR, but each agency also has their supplements. For us here in the VA, we have the VAR. We have the VAAR, which is the VAR, is the Veterans Affairs Acquisition Regulations. And again, that's our supplement to the FAR, because there's just a lot of unique procedures here in the VA that is distinguishable from the other federal agencies. Okay. The VA, again, is no different. So that's what I wanted to illustrate to you. And then we have a 10-minute break and I am open up for questions.
Okay, great. This is Vicki back at it. We're going to take some questions. I am not sure if there are any in the chat. Matt, did any pop up in the chat yet?
We just got one now, but other than that, not yet.
Okay, hold on one second. Hold on
Okay.
one second. I kind of wanted to ask a question. I get a lot of this type of question from my clients, and I'm sure other counselors, Apex counselors may have this. If a client has a new technology, how do they get that in front of, and you kind of touched on it a bit, how do they get that in front of the customer? For example, there's a client, there could be a client out there that has a you know how you have those mats as you enter a door, the mat will get rid of all the bacteria from the bottom of the you know, the foot, so they can go on in. How, and even I've even noticed in some of the chat, there are some folks on the webinar that have a new technology, like a new software that could potentially help the VA. How do they get that? Are you going to be covering that in more detail? Are you the first point of entry? Can you talk about that a little bit?
The answer is going to be, it depends.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason why I say this is one thing, right? So let's say you have an item that's going to be revolutionary in healthcare and it directly gets implanted into the patient, right? For example. Okay, well, that impacts the patient, right? Might have to go through FDA approval. I don't know. I'm not the expert. Okay, I'm just a contracts professional. Okay, but what the professional. So let's say, for example, if I gave you access to whatever department in the VA medical center there, here locally or elsewhere, and I give you access to that department and I allowed you to speak with a surgeon, and if that surgeon is willing to speak with you and you have something that's revolutionary that's going to help him treat patients, something like that may not even be his decision to even implement or adopt, because something like that may have to be decided at the VA level at DC. There's going to be some bigwig there and a committee that's going to look at those things and look at that product and say, is this innovative? Is this dangerous? Is this safe? Is this FDA approved? They have to go through all those things, and they have to ensure that that product that you are proposing is actually, well, is actually going to be, you know, a value added item, but plus, is it going to, does it meet regulations? Does it meet regulatory requirements? You know, and all those things. Okay. So it may not even be that simple.
Okay, that's good. Okay, are you the first point of entry for that conversation?
Yes. But what I would do is that I'm probably going to give you the point of contact for unsolicited proposals, and a contact at the VA in Washington. When I say VA, it's big VA to Washington D.C. And there's an inbox, so there's a person that you would send your request to, and then they should get back to you and tell you whether or not your item, you know, will be looked at or will be considered. They have to give you that feedback. They have to.
That's good. That's good. I have another question. I get a lot of this from clients. Ones that want to, they may not necessarily want to bite on a big contract, but they're interested in the micro purchase, those type of items, and say they're a service like janitorial or painting. How would you again be that first point of entry to get them in the right direction?
Sure. I mean, obviously, like anybody, I'm not going to know you from Adam or Angie. So you're reaching out, the vendor, when I say you, the vendor is going to reach out to me. I'm not going to know who you are upon initial introductions. I may have an indicator from a capability statement, maybe that's attached to the email that, hey, you do janitorial, hey, you do painting, or you do X, Y, and Z. You're still going to have to go through the procurement ready process with me, and to ensure that to ensure that once I determine you to be procurement ready, and then from there I'll give you for example, the directory for the facilities managers, if it relates to painting, for example, or interior design department, or if it relates to landscaping, if you're doing some landscaping for a quick job, I'm gonna get you I'm gonna get you those contacts. But like I said, I may not even be aware that you're looking for micro purchase, or even opportunities that are over the micro purchase threshold where things have to go in a contract. I'm going to let the department, actually establish that relationship or that rapport with you. Let them know that you're there and that you are available in the marketplace to provide those services, and it's going to be up to them to get it purchased. And it the person you may be talking to, chances are they're not the ones who's going to have the credit card. Okay.
Right.
But they're going to know who to go to get that purchased.
Okay, great.
They're not going to give you that information. They're not going to give you the information of that buyer, because that buyer could be a janitor himself, or that buyer could be the head of housekeeping.
Got it.
They're not going to know the first thing about contracts, about how to compete things or whatever. If that's applicable, they're going to know housekeeping, and all they have is a card because they went through an hour worth of training and they got themselves a credit card. So really, you're kind of at their mercy. And there's no such thing as a list of all the purchase card holders in our organization, for that matter. So I'm not going to be able to provide you that. And even if I could, I couldn't even do that.
No.
That just wouldn't be right.
Great, good. One last question before I pass it to Matt. And this comes up often as I'm counseling as a counselor. I get many clients that have Gmail extensions on their email, and then Yahoo. How important is getting that up and running, and even company websites? Some clients don't even have a company website. How important is a company website in order to engage with the VA, and even the email extensions? Or you might be talking about that a little later as well.
I will.
Okay.
Oh,
good.
I will, and probably, if it's out of the 8 sections that I'm going to be talking about throughout this whole briefing, procurement readiness is not so detailed as a whole program, but I am going to touch on it. But one aspect of it, I am going to go into extreme detail, and my philosophy as to why I prefer a corporate email address over, say, a Gmail address.
Okay.
And I'm
Great.
really going to illustrate that to drive it home.
Great. Over to you, Matt, with your question. Thank you.
All right, so our very first one is from Kelly that says, where's a good email address to send capability statements for the transportation of freight?
I will give you that email address at the very end of the presentation.
Awesome. And then we have one from Brenda. It says, how do I get contracted to conduct the VA examination services at my office? I'm also interested in contracting to provide brick and mortar as well as mobile phlebotomy services.
Okay, that's something that we'll have to probably talk about one-on-one. All I'm going to say is that the email that I'm going to provide you, well, it's my email address. You got to reach out to me. I'm not going to reach out to you. So if you're interested in reaching out to me and wanting to know more, again, if I had to reach out to you and grab the attendance list from Vicky, if I reached out to you from that list, that would be soliciting. I can't do that. But if you want to, in turn, like I said, at the end of this presentation, I'll offer you my email address. And if you want to continue our dialogue and reach out to me, and hopes of getting in front of those decision makers, those customers at those VA medical centers, then there's a process before I can provide you that directory and that contact information.
Okay, and then this is also from Brenda. She just said, I also need the capability statement as well as any other necessary documents / forms to start contracting process. And
Can you repeat that once more, please?
oh yeah.
I got distracted here for a minute.
Oh, you're fine.
Mhm.
She says, I also need the capability statement as well as any other necessary documents or forms to start the contracting process. I also couldn't read your card on the screen. Could you please provide contact info?
Yeah, I will provide that at the end.
Okay.
If I could interject on that, if you are needing help with your capability statement, I recommend you connect with your Apex Accelerator counselor before you connect with any federal agency or any state agency or any city agency. Connect with your Apex counselor to make sure you're at least ready to get to the next step. That's just kind of my thought on that, and it's over.
Well, I
Yeah.
agree with you, Vicky, on that, because first impressions are lasting ones. You'll hear me constantly say that. If you're not sure about the capability statement, I used to critique capability statements the first couple of years doing this job, but then I realized that it's not really my lane. It's really the PTAX lane. But I've seen so many of them that I believe that I can critique on it. But again, it's not my forte really officially. But yeah, absolutely. The Apex can certainly. And Vicky, I want to ask you, do you still provide workshops on how to assemble those capability statements?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
That's really important. And also make sure that the capability statement can be understood, say by your, 10th grade nephew, because if I'm not going to understand it, then chances are the end users who ultimately will make that decision of whether or not they're interested in your firm, if I can't understand it, chances are they're not going to be able to understand it. So that's it in a nutshell on that regard. When you talk about providing me, to answer that question, the last question, if you're going to reach out to me and provide me your capability statement, that's pretty much all I need to get started. To kick off that dialogue, and the processes here internally. But if you're going to send me like your letter from SBA stating that you're an STV OSP certified through SBA, or you're going to send me a letter saying that you are a bona fide business, I don't, your W-2, I don't need those. Okay, please don't send me those things, because all I need for right now is your capability statement, and your eligibility to do business as a small business is going to be through SAM. If you're registered in SAM, you are ready to do well. You are eligible to receive awards. Let's put it that way. Whether or not you're ready to receive awards, again, that's a whole nother topic, and that's something that I'm going to touch on here after the intermission.
Yeah. And then we have one more from Karen, who says, how do we identify and get before the P card holders in our NAICS codes? How do we present our capabilities and offerings to the buyers at our local VA medical centers?
Yeah, for P card holders, you're not even going to know. Chances are you will not get in front of the purchase card holders. But your materials, such as your capability statements and other corporate literature, will be provided to them.
See any other questions in there?
Well, this one's just a general one. I have 10 to noon. What time does it actually go until, as in the meeting?
5 o'clock. No, it goes
What
until
time?
no, it goes until 12 or 12:30. But we have kind of I've kind of gone a little bit. I need to speed it up a little bit.
And if you need to jump off, do so. This event will be recorded. It should be up in the queue, and I typed in the chat where you will find the recording. So you may want to make note of that, and we'll probably add it back in the chat where you can find the recording. The other piece to that, the presentation, the chart deck will not be provided. So you will have to solely depend on the recording.
I'm
Over.
going to remind you all, if I haven't reminded you earlier at the beginning, that after the intermission, this is where the more important and the more critical information lies. And so again, I don't want to pressure you in staying. If you have other commitments, that's fine. But I just want to emphasize that for you and keep you engaged.
And just remember, and I know I see on the chart that we're back, your Apex Accelerator counselor is here to help you get prepared to be that, to your elevator pitch, your capability statement, looking up your appropriate government codes, your NAICS codes, your product service codes, even at the state level, your UNSPSC codes. But we're here to help. So just reach out to your counselor to schedule a session to get you ready to get in front of the VA. Over.
Okay. So without further ado, let's go ahead and continue. I think we might have time at the end, but we'll see. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to show you step by step how the contract specialist uses the ordering hierarchy. This is applied to supplies, prosthetics, services, construction, medical staffing, leasing, and so forth. Probably in the next 10 or 12 slides, I'm going to illustrate the steps needed to purchase 25 stethoscopes with a total independent government cost estimate of $27,500. As you know, this is over the micro purchase threshold for supplies. Therefore, it wouldn't normally be purchased with a government purchase card. More specifically, the customer is requesting electronic stethoscopes. But before I go into that, I want to talk about where where small businesses, to include the other socioeconomic small businesses, and where they fall in this entire ecosystem of small businesses, and how the VA looks at certain socioeconomic categories in terms of preferences and things like that. Okay, the whole federal government as a whole, all 24 federal agencies across the land, there is parity among the small disadvantaged business, the historically underutilized business zone or hub zone small businesses, the veteran-owned small businesses, the women-owned small businesses, and the small business. When I say small business, it's a small business that is not certified as a disadvantaged business, that's not economically or socially disadvantaged in any way. Is not located, or the owners do not reside, or the employees do not reside, or enough of those employees reside in a hub zone, or nor are they a veteran, nor are they a woman. So that's why small business on the far right hand side, that's how it's distinguished. And so that is a type of small business in its own right. Okay, so when I talk about small disadvantaged business and the 8A, and I look at hub zone, the historically underutilized business zones, veteran-owned small business or service disabled, women-owned small business or women-owned small business, and so forth, those are referred to socioeconomic small businesses. The small business on its own on the far right is just a small business with no socioeconomic certifications. And then in the federal government as a whole, there is parity among all of those. Shown there, every single federal agency across the land. We'll look at each and every one of those on par with each other. Except the VA. It's a little bit different here in the VA. Now in the VA, yes, we're aware. Yes, we do business with all those small businesses and socioeconomic small businesses alike. We are no different than any other federal agency. However, we're going to give preference. We're going to give first and second preference. We're going to give first and second preference to service disabled veteran-owned small business as well as veteran-owned small business. And then there's all others. And don't be discouraged if you're not a service disabled veteran-owned small business or a veteran-owned small business. I want to make that abundantly clear. Do not get discouraged, because more often than not, we're going to do business with firms that are other than veteran-owned businesses. An STVOSB or a VOSB does not provide everything under the sun, okay? But they do offer a lot from a wide range of industries, okay? Women-owned and hub zone small businesses and 8A companies, they provide as much capability, and they're just as great as the STVOSBs and VOSBs. But know that, and just know that not one specific or a particular socioeconomic category is great at doing everything. And I'm going to illustrate that on the very last section. But here in the VA, we have first and second preference for STVOSBs and VOSBs, and in that order. Now, something occurred on 1 January of this year for an SDVOSB and or a VOSB to get to become CVE eligible or certified as a bona fide SDVOSB or VOSB. Again, if you wanted, okay, up until 30 December of 2022, which is about three and a half months ago, SDVOSBs and VOSBs who wanted to do business with the VA, they all had to be certified as bona fide SDVOSBs and VOSBs. That's if the veteran-owned businesses wanted to do business with us, the VA. However, as of 1 January of this year, the responsibility to determine their eligibility to register and to become an actual bona fide certified veteran-owned company, that responsibility now has been turned over from the VA to the Small Business Administration. So now the Small Business Administration, they are responsible for not only women-owned small business certifications, the SBA 8A Business Development Program, Hub Zone, SDB. Basically now they're now responsible for also for veteran-owned companies. Okay, so again, the VA does not no longer have responsibility. Okay, hopefully you can hear me now. So again, okay, now the responsibility to register, I'm sorry, to certify STVOSBs and VOSBs now, that again, that has been transferred to the SBA effective 1 January. So if you want to get registered and become a certified STVOSB and VOSB, you need to reach out to the SBA now, the Small Business Administration. So what does that mean for you if you want to do business with not only the VA, but the other federal agencies that are out there? Well, now, since the SBA has taken it over from the VA, SBA has oversight of the whole entire program. And so basically, if you as an STVOSB or VOSB want to do business and you have self-certified in doing business as an STVOSB or VOSB, you know, without that official certification, and you were doing business with the Department of Energy or the Department of the Air Force or Department of Agriculture and so forth, you know, you were able to just self-certify as a veteran-owned business, STVOSB or VOSB, and we were able to get socioeconomic credit for that. Now, since the SBA has taken it over from the VA, now it requires every SDVOSB and VOSB doing business in this country and want to do business in that capacity as an SDVOSB and or VOSB, you must now be certified. So what does that mean for the SDVOSBs and VOSBs who are not certified, or the ones that are certified? Okay, if you are certified as an SDVOSB or VOSB, and as a result of this change or this transition as of 1 January of this year, 2023, there is no immediate action required for verified VOSB or SDVOSB owners at this time. Now, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2021, it permits SDVOSBs to remain self-certified up to 1 year after this transfer. So 9.5 months from now, 1 January of 2024, which is next year, you can self-certify as an SDVOSB or VOSB up until that date, and we will still get credit, our socioeconomic credit on our side in the government for those SDVOSBs or VOSB awards. But come 1 January 2024, you will have to be officially certified and formally certified as an SDVOSB and VOSB. The veteran-owned businesses verified by the VA, let's say you were previously verified by the VA prior to 1 January, you do not need to do anything on your end to transfer your status. That has already been done for you. You will not lose your status. The VA and the SBA will keep all stakeholders updated on the new CVE verification process. Now, for those who were previously deemed certified by the Department of Veterans Affairs through the CVE process, you know, the older process, not the new, if you were deemed certified, they're going to add 1 year to that certification. So typically it's a 3-year certification. They're going to add +1 to that for a total of 4 years. So you get a 4-year official certification for that. Okay. And I think that extra 1 year that's added on there, I think that what that does is that it provides wiggle room and a little bit of breathing room for those who work at SBA to get other vendors or other SDVOSBs and VOSBs officially certified. It gives them a little bit of breathing space so they can focus on the ones who requires or who are requesting the initial certification with SBA. And then for those who had it previously, if you're still current at the turn of this year, you know, on 1 January, they're just giving you the extra year on top of that. So that way they can focus more on the ones who need that initial certification. Okay. Now, going back to the electronic stethoscope, let's talk about that. Okay. Again, the VA medical center somewhere wants stethoscopes. In fact, they want the electronic ones. Okay. And there's 25 units for a total of 27,500, which is 17,500 above the micro purchase threshold. So we cannot buy this on a purchase card. But before we actually spend money and buy something, we have to go into the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, or at least follow the FAR in FAR Part 8. And we have to make sure to see, hey, wait a minute, there might be already electronic stethoscopes sitting on a shelf somewhere, maybe at the VA or maybe elsewhere. Maybe we don't have to buy it. We can just get with the inventory management specialist and say, hey, do you have 25 of these things that you have lying around? Maybe we can just, maybe that was bought previously and nobody claimed those and it's on your shelf. Can we take those from you? Chances are that's probably not going to be the case with this type of item. So where we have to go first, again, is inventories of the requiring agency. The requiring agency in this case will be us, the VA. We require these electronic stethoscopes, but it just so happens again that we don't have any in our inventory or at our warehouses. How about excess from other agencies? Like the United States Air Force. We have Wright-Patterson Air Force Base down the street from us. Let's say Dayton needs something and they say, hey, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base supply branch, do you guys have 25 electronic stethoscopes? And they'll say, no. Chances are it'll probably be a no. Or we can talk to GSA and say, hey, GSA, I know you manage excess personal property from other agencies. Do you have anything for us? Do you have something equivalent or something that's identical to what we asked for? And if they say no, then we have to look at Ability One. Ability One is a mandatory source when it comes to supply items, okay? Which means that it is mandatory. Just because it's mandatory doesn't mean that Ability One is going to have that available. But what that means for the contract specialist is that it's mandatory that we have to check with Ability One. There's no exceptions. We can't skip them. We have to ask Ability One, hey, do you have this item? And once we conclude our market research that Ability One does not, then we move on. But let me talk about Ability One program. Basically, it's the largest federal source of employment for people who are blind or have significant disabilities. Through a national network of more than 600 nonprofit agencies, the program provides the federal government products and services at fair market prices. Under the Competition and Contracting Act, or CECA, Ability One procurements are considered other than competitive procurements, which authorizes certain exceptions to the full and open competition. When they say full and open competition, all that means is that everyone in the entire marketplace for that particular item or who is in that industry can participate in that opportunity, meaning all small businesses, all large businesses alike, hub zones, 8As, and so forth. They all can compete. That's what full and open competition means, which is also synonymous with one word, unrestricted. So if you see the terminology unrestricted or full and open competition, they mean the exact same thing. Okay. Now, if Ability One doesn't have those electronic stethoscopes, then you need to ask the Federal Prison Industries, FPI, or Unicor. Now, I know that Unicor deals, I think, with 7 different product lines or 7 different major things or categories in their portfolio. But the one major thing that I can think of right offhand and remember that is that Unicor produces office furniture. So if you're not buying electronic stethoscope, for example, and you're buying office furniture, it's mandatory that you have to look in the federal prison industries and see if they have a particular conference table or cubicle or desk or cabinet and so forth that are made for offices. And they are beautiful products in what they produce there. The whole point of that for FPI is basically it's a wholly owned government corporation created by Congress in 1934. And what they do is that they administer industrial operations in federal penal and correctional institutions. FPI is authorized to produce commodities for consumption in penal institutions or for sale of the government, but is prohibited from selling to the public. So if you wanted to buy office furniture from the FPI or Federal Prison Industries, you are not able to do that. The government can. But we just found out from the previous slide that we cannot find electronic stethoscopes in any of those 4 areas. So we're going to now have to buy it. So the first place we're going to go to from left to right as you're viewing your screen, we're going to have to start with the VA. The VA actually has pre-established multiple award contracts or IDIQs and BPAs at the VA level. So there are program offices, large nationwide program offices, the SAC, which stands for Strategic Acquisition Center of Excellence. And then next to that, we have the NAC in blue, National Acquisition Center of Excellence. Basically, there are contracts and pre-established contracts with pre-approved vendors that are on those contracts, and they provide medical equipment and supplies. So to look for those electronic stethoscopes, we have to go to the SAC first. Let's see if the Strategic Acquisition Center of Excellence has those electronic stethoscopes. Who do we start with? We got to make sure that, well, service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, or SDVOSB, that one socioeconomic category, they have first preference. So we have to look, when I say we, the contract specialist has to look for 2 or more service disabled veteran-owned small businesses. And if we can find 2 or more SDVOSBs, then we can set it aside for just those 2 SDVOSBs. That's what a set aside is. So you have all these vendors that are out there. You got women-owns and hub zones and other small businesses and SDVOSBs and VOSBs, and we want to compete this. Well, who gets first preference? Is the SDVOSBs. So if we can find 2 or more SDVOSBs, then we can exclusively compete it just among those 2 or more SDVOSBs. So the contract specialist went into SAC, when they went into their portal and they looked for that contract. And again, all those 5 discs that you see on your screen, those are considered all within the closed market. So that contract specialist is going to go on the SAC and they're going to look for those stethoscopes. And that's the VA Federal Supply Schedule. Well, they just found 1. So we cannot fulfill the VA rule of 2. We cannot find 2 or more SDVOSBs. So where do we go? Do we go to the NAC? Go to the NAC first to look for SDVOSBs? 97 times out of 100, chances are if something is available in the SAC, in the purple, chances are it's not going to be available in the NAC. There's no duplicity, I should say. There isn't any redundancy. So it's not like, hey, if we can't find electronic stethoscopes in the SAC, and it doesn't mean that the NAC is going to have it. Okay, the SAC is going to offer different things than what the NAC is going to offer. 2 separate offices. Okay, there are some exceptions. But in this case, there are no SDVOSBs, not even 1 for that matter, in the NAC. In fact, the guy at the NAC, he's telling us you better move on because there's nothing of that sort here at the NAC. So I need you to go to the next. Let's go to GSA. Do we have anything in GSA? Nope, there are none. Let's go to SEWP, SEWP. Why do I have to go to SEWP? SEWP is the Solutions for Enterprise-Wide Procurement. It's a NASA SEWP contract. It's for IT. We're not buying IT. We're not buying computer hardware, nor are we buying commercial software. So that does not apply. So we had to skip that. So again, the guy at the SEWP program office is telling us to move on. There's nothing here. So the 5th one, and what you see there is going to be at the NCO 10 level, or Network Contracting Office 10, the local contracting office. That's us. But upon the contract specialist, upon looking at available contracts that are put together at the local level, we have to see if there's anything like electronic stethoscopes on a particular vehicle on an IDIQ that maybe we probably awarded maybe last year, the year before. There's a lot of local contracts that we put in place. For this one here, all he found was architectural engineering MATOC IDIQ contract. Doesn't apply. There's court reporting services that has nothing to do with stethoscopes. And there's immunochemistry BPA out there, and among many, many, many other local contracts that we have in place. So doesn't apply. So, but we have to at least look at those. And so we have to move on. So what is the opposite of closed market? It is open market. What is open market exactly? SAM.gov, contract opportunities. hey, we found 2 SDVOSBs and we were able to compete it between those two. And one of those two provided us the best quote. The quote of best value. When I say best value, it does not necessarily mean price. It's the lowest price technically acceptable. The US government is actually, as a whole, are trying to encourage federal contracting to make the best value procurement. So again, best value does not always mean lowest price technically acceptable. Lowest price, when we say best value for something that is commercial in nature, there are 3 aspects that makes up best value. When you talk about best value, yes, it does include price, but it also includes quality, and it also includes delivery. So if 2 vendors offer something and they're offering it, say, at an equal price, or let's say the highest price is offering to get it in your hands in 72 hours versus the lower quote who can get it to us in 2 weeks, then it's going to be up to the end user, those departments, then it's going to be up to the end user to say, we need this by the end of this week. I cannot wait 2 weeks. But the 2 prices, despite being higher than the lower price, that might be the successful awardee who's going to get that, because only that vendor can provide that within 72 hours or by the end of the week. The other vendor, despite them being the lowest price, they can only get it in our hands in 2 weeks. So again, best value sometimes may not be dependent on price alone. So keep that in mind. But what if the situation's different? What if we only found one SDVOSB in the open market for whatever reason? Where do we have to go? And who do we look for now? We have to look for veteran-owned small business. We got to find 2 or more veteran-owned small businesses. So again, we know that the SAC offers electronic stethoscopes. So we, the contract specialist, has to go in there into that portal and has to go and look. There are none. Oh, wow, there happens to be one SDVOSB in the top platform, but there is no VOSBs. That's odd. And of course, like the previous tier, well, the NAC is not going to have that either. So we're going to have to go to GSA, and nor do they have it. SOUP doesn't apply because they offer commercial IT products and services. And of course, there's no local contracts that has, we don't have a local contract for that, as mentioned earlier. But when we go to the open market, we only found one VOSB. This is where this is less common of what we'll see, but this also applies, and this will apply to you. I kind of want to demonstrate to you the logic behind this. Okay. Now, this doesn't happen very often, but as you remember, if you look at the top platform, there was only one SDVOSB. Okay. Yes, it was awarded because we found 2 SDVOSBs, but what I'm talking about here, what if we only found one SDVOSB on the top platform? And obviously we can't set it aside, nor are we going to even sole source it, because this incurs that we compete it. So we only found one SDVOSB. And then it's discovered that we only found one VOSB in the open market. So basically we can't even compete it amongst VOSBs because there's only one of those. However, we can set it aside, and only in this situation we can set it aside. Why? Because at the end of the day, both are veteran owned. So you have to remember, and you have to remember this, all service disabled veteran owned small businesses are also veteran owned small businesses. But not all VOSBs are SDVOSBs. VOSBs. Continuing, let's just say that we cannot find any VOSBs, and we're going to continue on. We're going to say, well, who do we look for now? If it's under $250,000 in aggregate value, if it's less than $250,000 in aggregate value, let's say if it's a service, then that would mean the aggregate value is the combined value of that base period and the 4 future option periods. Those have to be priced as well. So if it's all together less than $250,000, then we can also set it aside for small businesses. And who are those small businesses? Could be a small business, woman-owned, 8A, hub zone, SDB, and so forth. And that includes SDVOSBs and VOSBs. Why? Because at the end of the day, they're also small businesses, so they get that second and third chance respectively. And of course, it's not really common that we will get this far in this continuum usually, but what I'm trying to demonstrate for you is the logic. If we had to exhaust all avenues, this is what we would, this is the complete cycle in which we would have to complete. So if we cannot find any small businesses for whatever reason, we have to compete full and open. What does that include? Well, the 3 ugly black balls on the bottom, those are large businesses. So we have to consider those, and then we have to consider all others. That is what we call full and open competition. Now, again, we are rarely going to get to this point. We'll probably get to the midway point in this cycle. Again, I just wanted to demonstrate the whole cycle. If we're going this far, then the contract specialist has not done proper market research. It could be other factors at bay here. So I hope that properly illustrates it for you at the fullest. Now for services, if we're not buying electronic stethoscopes and we're buying a service, say janitorial or paper shredding, window washing, etc., then the mandatory source that we have to go through, meaning the one place that we certainly have to look at and we can't skip or overlook, that's ability 1. Okay, that's the real hard one out of the way. Now it's going to be we're going to coast a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit more interesting and still very relevant to you all. So here is a little hint. Are you ready? Okay, well, we're talking about procurement readiness. We have this caveman trying to pick up this block, and he can't seem to go anywhere with it because obviously it's, well, the other caveman, he can roll this, he can roll right on by. He's procurement ready. He can proceed, and he can proceed and progress and move on. But the guy here with that block, what's on that block? What does it say here? He's thinking networking is a waste of time. Okay, well, if I look at your procurement ready screening assessment and I see that you have not even participated in one business to business matchmaker event in Cleveland or the Dayton or the Nutter Center here at Wright State University, or the one in Indianapolis, or the one they hold up in Warren, Michigan, or the Detroit area, if you have not attended those business to business matchmakers or any trade shows or any panel somewhere, then it tells me that you haven't made the effort to network. So that's probably going to be one flag against you. Now, is that compulsory? No. But there's a methodology in me determining whether or not you're procurement ready. So if that's all you have on your procurement ready screening assessment, you have no history in doing business with the federal government, to include the VA or even state government, but you've only, and you just established your business, say 2 months ago, but you don't have any contracts or previous contracts, but you've been to one event, or you've spoken at length with your Apex accelerator in your area, or with SBA, well, you're going to have to mention those, because that tells me that you have taken the effort to work on your business. You don't necessarily have to have a previous contract. That's not what I'm saying. But if you haven't made the effort in progressing and developing yourself as a business, and at the minimum, if you haven't spoke to even your PTAC accelerator or SBA or your small business development centers, probably not going to consider you to be procurement ready. If you happen to have a contract award with the VA and you got lucky getting one contract award or one business transaction of $2,100 for a supply item, and you got that one buy from the VA department somewhere, and you don't have anything else, you haven't spoken to the PTAC, you haven't spoken to SBDC or SBA, I'm probably going to give you the benefit of a doubt anyway, because you had at least one transaction with the VA, and I'm probably going to be deeming you procurement ready. Reluctantly, but I will have to do my due diligence, and I will have to be consistent and fair and say, I will give you the benefit of a doubt. Now, while we're on this topic, if you have attended this training or this familiarization, this webinar today, doing business with the VA, then I'm going to deem you to be procurement ready. Why? Because when you annotate this session as being something that you participated in, and you learned something from the VA, then you've taken the effort to learn more about how to do business with us. I'm going to give you the benefit of a doubt as well to say, if this is all you did and you established your business even a year ago, and you haven't had any experience or any contracts, or you haven't even spoken to an Apex accelerator, but you've attended this briefing, I'm going to deem you to be procurement ready. You still got to fill out that PRSA form. After you reach out to me, you'll receive instructions for that. But if this is the only thing that you participated in, I'm going to give you the benefit of a doubt and deem you to be procurement ready. Why? Because you've taken the time and effort to not only establish your business, but also learn more about how to do that. So on that rock or on that block, if you're calling me up and you're emailing me saying, what do you need? What does the VA need today? I don't know. I really don't know. But if you're asking me that question, then right off the bat, you're not procurement ready because you don't know how we do business. If you're asking me that question, what does the VA need? That tells me that you cannot differentiate between what a contracts person is and that of the customer. I'm sorry to be tough on you, but this is it. Okay, there's a lot of people who want to do business with us. And there's just so many hours in the day. Hence the reason why we're doing these kind of webinars, to educate you. Okay. If you're communicating with me from a golakers@yahoo.com, I probably won't answer you. Why? Not being mean, because it's probably going to go to my junk folder anyways. And it's going to delete at the end of the day. So I probably won't even be aware that you were trying to reach out to me, because our handy dandy computer networks here in the federal government, or more particularly and more specifically the VA, they're going to discriminate and put those things, if it's from a Yahoo, or a Gmail or Yahoo or AOL, it's going to get diverted and goes to my junk box. And sometimes they do come through. Actually, oftentimes they do come through, and I will answer those, and I'll explain further what I do with those. If you're expecting buyers to call you, it's not going to happen. If they don't know who you are, they're not going to call you. And then if you're asking me what the PTAC is, well, if you're asking me what the Apex accelerator is, then that's an easy one. I'm just going to refer you to the Apex accelerator. If you don't know who they are, then I can't even get started with you. And just because you have a GSA contract somewhere does not mean you're qualified. And doesn't even mean you're procurement ready. Anybody can contact GSA and say, yeah, I got on your contract, but the difference is it depends on whether or not you had any orders cut that were issued to you and awarded to you from that GSA contract. Yeah, you may be on a GSA contract, but you may not have any orders from that GSA contract. So there's a lot of what if scenarios there. Okay, but I'll get a little bit more in depth here. Let's talk about procurement readiness. Okay, now we see this ball or this sphere, right? And we had this capability statement. Yes, I know you're not going to give me a ball, a capability statement that's going to be the size of a basketball, but you have to visualize this. Okay. So when I see your capability statement, I happen to be at a business matchmaker and you hand me your capability statement, that's an icebreaker. Certainly the most important document that you're going to exchange with me, business cards and the like, right? So when I receive your capability statement, that tells me what you claim you can do. Has your NAICS codes, has your past performance even, has a little description on your products or service or capability. All that is invaluable, absolutely. Capability statement will always be important. But after the first 3 or 4 minutes, after we've broken the ice, again, it's going to tell me what you claim you can do. It does not give me any assurances that if we would to award you a contract today, in theory, it doesn't mean that you're going to deliver on it tomorrow. I don't know that. There's risks there. And that's where the procurement ready screening assessment comes into play. Okay. Now, let's look at it a little bit more. Let me give you a little bit more of an in-depth explanation of what that is. Some of you have probably received or have reached out to me and I've given you this procurement readiness, preparing to do business with the VA, right? This is something that the OSTABU VA, the VA OSTABU, these are the folks who give us guidance to the Small Business Liaison community. They have provided this booklet in 2017, and ever since that day, and every single vendor who's reached out to me since that day, I'm going to continue providing that booklet to vendors. Now, I'm always going to do that until they tell me to stop. But we were told and directed to provide this to every vendor. Somebody raised their hand at this event where we had this briefing, and there was all these small business liaisons, including me, in that room. And this was in Minnesota at a nationwide small business event. And some guy, I think you're all familiar with now, raised his hand and asked that question, asking, that's a good briefing about procurement readiness, but how do I know that if I give this to a vendor, they're all going to tell me that's procurement ready, and they're going to nod, vigorously. They're going to nod and say, yep, I'm procurement ready because I read the booklet. But I know darn well what the truth is going to be. Yes, there might be 1 or 2 or 3 they're going to read it, but the vast majority are not, because they want to hurry up and get through it, and they're going to tell me whatever they need to tell me so they can go and get in front of those end users or those customers. So what I did was I said, sir, I'm going to create this procurement ready screening assessment, and it's going to be verbatim from that booklet. So basically, I know you're not going to read that booklet for most of you, and that's okay. But what I did was I created this procurement ready screening assessment. So if you ignored the booklet, again, I have to provide it to you. I have no choice. But if you were to dive right into the procurement ready screening assessment, then you've already read the booklet. Again, the form that was created is verbatim from the booklet. Now, what is PR? That's procurement readiness. What is procurement readiness? Procurement readiness is the firm's demonstrated ability to effectively participate in the federal government contracting marketplace and successfully perform on contracts. Procurement readiness is also your understanding how to navigate the various procurements set aside for small businesses such as yourselves and respond to contracting opportunities. Now, the document, again, verbatim from the booklet, it's going to say the same thing that the booklet's going to say. It's going to say small businesses must have the registrations. Are you and Sam? The capabilities. Hey, what do you do? What's your NAICS codes? What kind of products do you have? Corporate history. Have you had a contract with the VA or other federal agencies in the past? Have you even had a contract or an agreement with private industry or corporate history? Let's say that you were doing business with Walmart or doing business with Target or Marion's Pizza. If you had a contract with them, hey, that tells me you got experience with a contract. And then I'm going to look at competitive advantage. It's going to ask you that. What makes you different? What makes you, why should we look at you and not your competitors? What makes you different? Oh, I offer the best value. Okay, everyone's going to claim that in their capability statement, but write it down on that procurement ready screening assessment, because a capability statement is going to have its limits on space. Tell me what your competitive advantage is. What's so different about your company and the rest? Well, we're professional. Okay, everybody's going to say that in our capability statement. We're going to offer the best price. Okay, that really, it's nice, but not really a priority for me. I just want to know if you can provide the best value and how. Basically, when you fill out the procurement ready screening assessment, and especially the last 3 questions on it, and I'll mention that here in the next slide. Basically, it's your opportunity to sell yourself. Okay, you're limited with the capability statement. The PRSA form here does a lot of things. Okay, and then you're probably wondering, well, where does this go? Well, once I deem you to be procurement ready, I review the 14-page document, and trust me, it's not going to take you very long to fill it out. Once you fill it out and I deem you to be procurement ready, I'm going to send it back to you. Then I will give you instructions, and I will also give you access to those departments that you can interface with. So once I deem you to be ready, then I can give you those contacts. And from then on, you are going to provide not only your capability statement for those end users, but you're also going to provide the procurement ready screening assessment. Now, are they going to look at the procurement ready screening assessment? Not necessarily, but what they'll see is that you've gone through some process with me, and that you were determined to be ready by some guy or some office, and they're going to feel more compelled to speak with you. If they don't speak with you, then I want to know why, because I've done everything on my end to help you get in there. If the other side of the government, the customers, they're not entertaining or considering speaking with you, I want to know why. Now, when completed, this assessment will help us determine a small business procurement readiness. Okay. Now, I can tell you right now, historically, since 2017, early 2017, and it fluctuates every year since then, but roughly 65 to 70% are not procurement ready. So 100 vendors will reach out to me in a given, let's say in a given quarter. 100 vendors will reach out to me. I'm going to use an even number. 65 or 70 of those are not going to be procurement ready. Why? They haven't returned their procurement ready screening assessment to me, or they'll send me a procurement readiness form that's not even completed, or they will not be deemed ready because they haven't gone to any events, they don't have any past performance, they don't have any of those things. They haven't made an effort. So I'm going to make that hard decision to say, yeah, you're not ready. But as it states there in that bullet there on that screen, I am going to refer those who are not ready to the Apex, formerly PTAC, SBA, and the Small Business Development Centers, and perhaps other partnered agencies. So I'm just not going to leave you in a lurch. I am going to refer you to those agencies so that way you can become ready. Okay. Now, of those, 30 to 35 of those vendors are going to be procurement ready. Why? Because pretty much 99% of those who's going to return that procurement ready screening assessment filled out, 99% of the time they're going to be ready. And then you'll have the opportunity to meet with me and or the customer, the key decision maker. Now, I talked about, kind of mentioned there the last 3 questions on page 13 and 14. Basically, in a nutshell, those 3 questions are this: what problem can you fix? Because let's face it, every agency has a problem or challenge, right? What problem can you fix at our agency? What widget or service or other capability can you offer that's going to help improve our mission, and most importantly, improve the care for our veterans? Second question is going to be, what's your solution? Third question is why we should trust you. Really, why should we trust you? If we were to give you a contract today, how are you going to deliver tomorrow? How can you give us those assurances that you will be able to perform on that contract successfully? Now you'll notice how it's kind of like the core of the avocado that you see there, right? Pretty much that's going to be the core. The most important thing out of the whole entire document is if you can adequately explain to me the problem that you can fix, the solution, and why we should trust you, that is going to be central in me determining whether or not you are ready. I have only one pet peeve, and it's this one. Introducing yourselves to the government from email domains such as AOL, Gmail, Hotmail, iCloud, Yahoo, etc., etc., will challenge our confidence in your commitment to do business when we evaluate your procurement readiness. It is the foundation of establishing trust in which vendors can build their image and credibility on. When doing business, a first impression is a lasting one. Otherwise, I will question whether or not you are serious in doing business at all. I probably won't engage with you. Emails from businesses using these free email domains are often delivered to our junk or spam folders. As a government employee, me replying to them could cause undue risks to our own agency's computer network. I have to ask, is the entrepreneur's name Jay Shizzle? Probably not. What does the number 27 mean in that? What is the company's name and the email address? Does the sender actually work at Google or Yahoo? Is this spam? I don't know for certain, but I'm going to treat it as spam by not opening it. If I do opening it, I'm going to cause some harmful effects to our computer networks here in the VA. Basically, I will act accordingly to protect our interests. In other words, I will delete your email without reading them, period. That is my responsibility. And I will have to admit that some letters, I think there's one letter and one number in this email address has actually been changed. This is an actual email address that was actually sent to me years ago. I did that to protect the innocent. I don't even know if that person is still in business, to be honest with you. But as an advocate for small businesses, it's also my job to educate and help you maximize your potential to receive contracts or agreements with the VA. If you have yet to reach out to me, this viewpoint will be explained in much greater detail in future email correspondence and training between myself and your business. A few letters in this email address was changed to protect the innocent. This email, this person was previously J Shizzle 27, believe it or not. There is a widely held belief small businesses, about 80%, who furnish medical supplies and equipment to the VA are employed by 2 or less people. Many of those have established their businesses in their own basements or operate from their grandmother's garage, yet they consistently deliver quality items to our VA customers. Now, if you're using something like jshizzle27@gmail.com, for example, please be aware people outside the contracts profession observe and understand things through a different lens. So keep in mind, you're not really marketing to me. You're appealing to those VA departments who know the nuts and bolts and the science behind your product and your industry. So don't give them reasons to assume you're working from your garage. Instead, give them the impression that you're already established. Their confidence in you is a good foundation for a solid business relationship. Now, I'm not telling you that you have to go out and lease or rent a warehouse, or you have to establish a brick and mortar store. I'm not saying that. But when I see an email such as this, and I see that it's professional, identifies who I'm going to be talking to. The person might be Jane. The company name is GIJ-Med Supply. Okay, so I kind of get the idea that maybe she's a woman-owned business as well as an SDVOSB. That's the assumptions that I'm going to make. And so it's professional. That in itself tells me a couple things that I might need to be aware of. They could be a woman-owned business, hence the name Jane. Oh, GIJ. GI Jane. Okay. Maybe it's a nickname she got when she served with the Marines or the Army or the Air Force. She's a chance it's probably she could be an SDVOSB or a VOSB. But when I see that email address in a professional way, and the way it's presented, I'm going to think that they're established. Yeah, they may very well have a brick and mortar store or a warehouse. They don't need to. I mean, like I said, most of them work out of their grandmother's garage. Okay. But that gives me the impression that they're established. That's all I'm saying. It gives me the confidence that I can continue my dialogue with them. And at the end of each email, please tell me who you are. Don't end an email with, "Thanks, dude." It isn't a very common name. I want to know who I'm talking to. If you're going to email me, please tell me your name at the end of that, your title. Are you the president of the company? Are you the CEO or the chief financial officer? And provide me your phone number. Or you can get a little bit, probably polish that up a little bit. Maybe provide a link somewhere, or you can go and raise the bar a little bit to be a little bit more presentable. I'm not saying you need to do this, but I'm saying these are the examples that I typically see. Okay. But let me know who I'm talking to if I'm going to respond to it. Okay. Next section, we're getting close to the end. Outreach. Outreach, it's your network. Basically, it's going to be about working on your business. Now, when you go to these outreach events, you are establishing and you are developing your own network. Your network is unique to you. Okay. Everyone who works within the confines of their business and they work in their office and they're running their business. I'm going to tell you, if you don't work on your business by venturing outside of that building and going to some of these outreach events, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to fail as a business. Yeah, it's inevitable. But I've been around for 7 years, Pak. Yeah, you're going to fail. It'll happen. When you go to these events, you're not really, you're networking, sure. But when you go to these events, you're also learning more about the industry you're in. So if you go to a particular trade show in your craft, I may not even be there. It may not even be government sponsored. Go to a trade show that relates to you, go to that. You might learn a thing or two. You might have a product that's so antiquated and obsolete, and you're going to wonder why we're no longer buying from you. Yeah, you probably didn't keep up to date on certain technologies and certain breakthroughs in technology and products. So it's probably best to get educated on that. And you can put that on your procurement ready screening assessment as well. It doesn't have to be a government sponsored event. You can put, hey, I went to this trade show, for interior design for kitchens specifically, and went to this and learned about different tabletops and countertops. Put that in there, put the date that you attended it, and I'll look at that. If it's relevant to your industry, I'll look at that, consider that as you making that effort to work on your business. Okay. At these events, we exchange cards and you give me your capability statement, And then I spent about 10 minutes with you. And these events, these business-to-business matchmakers, I'll start with that. They connect suppliers with buyers to fulfill contracting needs. These matchmakers, they provide specialized training on how to do business with federal, state, local, and prime contractors. And they offer an organized format of one-on-one sessions to discuss opportunities with buyers. And then, of course, these things present opportunities to network with government and private sector representatives. Well, you're not just meeting with me. Believe it or not, when you're waiting in line, wait to speak with me or the small business specialist from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or from TACOM in Warren, Michigan, they're sitting there and they got a booth and you're all waiting in line to speak with someone. You might very well be able to network and waiting in line. You could be waiting in line for a half an hour. I hope not, but if you're waiting in line with some other vendors, you can get talking with somebody else. And it just so happens that the person who's 2 places in front of you, you might get talking and you might actually do the same thing. That actually happened here, here at the Business Matchmaker here at the Nutter Center at Wright State University. I think it was my second event. I think it was not even here 2 years for the VA, but it was the second time doing the annual Business Matchmaker there at the Nutter Center. And then when I invited one of the vendors I met there into my physical office in my building, and I provided this doing business with the VA training face to face, because I did offer that, but now we're teleworking. I'm doing it by webinar now. But I got talking with the lady and I asked her and I said, now, did that event, that Business Matchmaker where I met you a couple months ago, did that help you at all? And she looked at me and she said, no, in fact, you did nothing for me. Okay. It's kind of like that auntie, that aunt we all have, the one aunt who's a little bit salty, a little bit rough around the edges. She was definitely that person. Kind of hurt, but she told me the truth. But what she did share with me was that while she was waiting to speak with me, it was within a long line. She got talking with another lady that was 2 places in front of her. And it just so happens they do the exact same thing and they run the same type of business. The lady who spoke to me had an issue with capacity, couldn't deliver things in a timely fashion. She was just inundated. Signs of a very good business, right? I think everyone wants that problem. Can't keep up with orders, right? But after a while, it has a detrimental effect to your business. So what she did was, when she got talking with this lady, maybe they went outside and had a smoke break during one of the breaks, smoking their Lucky Strikes. I don't know, but they got talking and they established a joint venture. And they helped each other, because it just so happens that the lady that was 2 spots ahead of her, they got to know each other. And it just so happens that the other lady, she was experiencing similar things. So when they established a joint venture, they no longer had that problem of meeting the demands to deliver goods to their customers. So not only are you going to be networking with government people, yes, that's apparent. But what is far less apparent is that sometimes you might have that opportunity to meet with some other vendor that has the same issues and the same challenges as you. That's the other aspect of opportunities that can arise out of that session, out of that event. So I place a lot of emphasis on those types of events. In fact, I place probably the utmost value in those things. And again, lastly, at these events, it's an opportunity for you, and it's an opportunity for me to present opportunities to network with government and private sector representatives, as I spoke at length about. Okay, let's talk about business performance. These are the last 3 slides. Let's talk about business performance. Okay, and this is how we did with our socioeconomic goals. Okay, now, fiscal year 2022, small business goal results. Small business program goal results. Okay, fiscal year 2022 was the very last complete fiscal year. I really can't give any data for fiscal year 23 because we're in the middle of it. So this data is going to give you a big picture on the fiscal year 2022 on how we did in our socioeconomic goals towards our agency objectives. Okay, let's start with SDVOSB. SDVOSB, the minimum criteria to get green for the service disabled veteran-owned small business is 25%. We got 51.24%. We more than doubled that expectation. So we do exceptionally well for SDVOSB goals. For SDVOSBs during that fiscal year, we spent a total of $331 million to SDVOSBs alone. And that was an increase of about $61 million from the previous year, 2021. And our goal actually went up almost 8%. Now for VOSB, the minimum to get green is 27%. And we did almost as good. We knocked that out of the park as well. 52%. We spent about nearly a little over 337 million that year for VOSBs, veteran-owned small businesses. We spent about a little over $50 million more than we did the previous year. And our goal went up almost 6% to 52%. Now for hub zone, our minimum is 3% to achieve green. We have not achieved green, well, during my time here. That was probably the closest we ever came, 2.87%. We were so close. A lot of the other small business liaisons, I'm not going to say many, I would say some out there are really, you know, they're concerned about SDVOSBs and VOSB goals. Absolutely, we all are. That is first and foremost the most important statistic. There's less emphasis on hub zone and women-owned and small disadvantaged business. In fact, we're not even. It's measured, SDB and 8A, they're combined. It's measured, and I'll show you here, but it's not graded. So you can't really get green, yellow, or red. It's still measured, but I'll show you that. But the hub zone, women-owned, and 8A and SDB, the small disadvantaged business, to me, they're just as important. Because if an SDVOSB and a VOSB, they're not going to be able to provide everything for the government. Okay, it's just not possible. Okay. I feel that the hub zones and women-owned and the other socioeconomic categories can also provide equal things and equal quality. But since I work at the VA, like I said, there's preference for SDVOSBs and VOSBs. We cannot get away from that. Okay. And what I echoed, and I want to echo what I mentioned before, don't get discouraged by these numbers. Okay. So veteran-owned companies don't provide everything. Okay. If you're a hub zone or you're a women-owned or both or an SDB, by all means, do not get discouraged. That's kind of proof there that $18 million in business with the hub zones. Yeah, we do business with hub zone. So yeah, definitely. Woman-owned, don't be alarmed by this. I'm not very proud of it. Only because for women-owned, it's 5% minimum, and we didn't even get close. Well, we got somewhat close to yellow. To me, that's not acceptable. And fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 20, the two previous fiscal years, we actually did really well for women-owned. In fact, in fiscal year 2020, we actually were the second highest out of the 18 VISNs across the country for women-owned. We really did well. We got green, obviously, but we were the second highest out of the 18 VISNs. That is something that I'm very proud of, but I was actually deflated when we got the results for fiscal year 22. It's embarrassing. The woman-owned and hub-zone goals, again, are very important. Yeah, like it says there, we can do it. Absolutely, women-owned businesses can do it. So I'm motivated to get more woman-owned businesses out there. Okay. Again, we spent $20 million for women-owned businesses, and it was a drop by almost 2%, 2% for the women-owned goals. So we were comfortably hovering around the low 5%, mid 5% range, but not that year. And we spent a little bit more. We spent about a little over $11 million more than we did the previous year. And of course, we have our SBA's 8A program, or combined with small disadvantaged business. It's 5%, but we more than almost 5 times. We pretty much achieved 5 times that 5% minimum. We did really well there, but it's not graded for the VA, but it is still measured. 5% is the norm for the entire federal government and all other agencies. And then as I previously showed you, the 3% for hub zone on the far left, and the 5% for women-owned in the middle, and of course the 5% for STB. Those bottom 3 and those minimum percentages, that's the same throughout all federal agencies. So it's the same. The only exception is the top 2, 25% for ST-VOSBs and 27% for VOSBs. That is way, way above the rest of the agencies. I think ST-VOSB for other agencies is 3% for ST-VOSBs, and I think it's 5% for VOSBs. So it is significantly higher. So because they expect us to achieve that, because they know that the ST-VOSBs and VOSBs, they're going to have a lot more opportunities here in the VA. Okay, so know that. Okay. Overall small business goals. When I first started, it was about 32%, I think, not the 50 you see there. And I think it gradually went up to 35% and then 37% and somewhere in the 40s. And then today it's 50%. That might change even further, but that 50% has actually remained the same for the last couple of years. I expect that to probably change. We become a victim of our own success, for lack of a better word or better phrase. You know, we continuously strive, and overall we improve every year. So they keep raising that minimum of 50% in order for us to achieve green for that overall small business goal. And that's a combination of all ST-VOSBs, VOSBs, women-owned, hub zone, and other small businesses and so forth. We happen to get, well, that was the highest we've ever done back in fiscal year 22. Nearly 69%. If you receive the same briefing from another small business liaison and any other federal agencies other than the VA, you're going to probably see a total small business achievement of around anywhere between 35 and 40%, roughly. Where 65 to 70% of the business that a federal agency would do would typically be a large business. But here in the VA, we actually do more business with small businesses than we do with large. So that is definitely very encouraging. And I like to see that get steadily higher. For small businesses in fiscal year 22, for small businesses expenditures, small businesses as a whole received $443 million. Large businesses received, well, less than half that. 202 million, about $203 million. That's what large businesses received for a total of $645,579,769. That figure is just for VISN 10 alone. Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. That's it. Almost 2/3 of $1 billion just in fiscal year 22. I want to add to that about, this is where it gets a little bit murky, but I'm basically going to simply say the $645,579,769. about, I would say about 40% of that, 40 or 45% of that big figure at the bottom, about 45% of that went to contracts. The other 65% is attributed by purchase card. I'll let that simmer with you. So the majority of that figure was attributed by purchase card transactions. And again, that figure you see down there only relates to VISN 10, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. Out of the 18 VISNs across the country, we are the second or third largest spender of the 18 VISNs. I think it's VISN 8 in Florida and Southern Georgia. That's VISN 8. I think they did, second most, and I think it goes back and forth between VISN 8 in Florida and Georgia, and it goes in between them and VISN 22, and that encompasses Southern California, Arizona, and most of New Mexico. So VISN 22 is a big area. Yeah, VISN 22 in the Southwest United States, and then Florida, VISN 8. They do a little bit more than we do. And then there's 14 after us, or 15 after us. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here in this region. In summary, I have talked about all those things. Do you have any questions?
Unfortunately, Puck, there's no time for questions.
Got it.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Very thorough, very thorough. I know I gained and gleaned many great nuggets, and I'm sure for those who stayed on the line till the end gleaned as well. They see the contact information available, and I'm going to stop the recording at this time. But before I stop the recording, it will be located. I've annotated in the chat. Give us about a week to get it uploaded, but you can go to ohio.apex.edu to get the link to revisit the recording. Thank you so much for your time. I'm stopping the
Hello, Vicky.
stopping the recording. Let me stop the recording.